Hello, this is about creating projects. So before we talk about projects, let's talk about resources. And actually, before we talk about resources, we're going to talk a little bit about Google Cloud Platform's infrastructure. So Google has a number of what's called data centers spread across the world. And inside of those data centers is where they run. They actually have a bunch of computers, networking, wiring, power, right? And that's what basically powers all the functionality that Google provides us. And those data centers are organized around the world with some higher level abstractions. And those are going to be, scroll down. So before we look at these things, which are regions, they actually have what's called zones. So these data centers, maybe one or more of them, are logically grouped into what's called a zone. And typically there's 3 of these grouped together into a higher level grouping called a region. And so what we're looking at here are these blue dots spread across the world. Those are regions. Okay? And again, so if you look at this, they have regions all over the world. Okay. So what does Google do with all of this infrastructure is that they provide us some functionality. And broadly, that functionality is provided through what's called a resource. So a resource may be a virtual machine that provides us some compute functionality. It may be a database. It could be lots of different things. So Google uses their infrastructure to basically power the ability to give us resources. Okay? And now resources themselves are generally either they could be zonal resources, which means they're basically created in a particular zone, and typically that means that they're only usable within the context of that zone. They could be created at the region, and again, that basically means that it lives in the region and maybe only things in the same region have access to it. And the last case would be a global resource, that is something that lives lives outside the scope of any particular region and generally is accessible by any resource in any of the regions. Okay, so again, think about resources that can, and different kinds of resources can be placed in different sorts of areas, right? So we'll get to that. That'll be very particular to a resource type. Now, resources themselves are actually organized under projects. So the way this really works is you create a project, or you have a project, and then inside that project you start creating resources in that project. And in particular, a resource can only live in one project. So a resource cannot be associated with 2 different projects. So we're going to go through, look at a project, and then we'll go through the exercise of creating a project. So when you created your Google Cloud account, right? So what you do? You create your Google account, then you activated your Google Cloud Platform. When you did that, it actually already created a single project for you called My First Project. And there's no resources associated with it. It's just an empty project, just something to start with. And there's sort of 3 key things about projects you should sort of identifiers. One is the name, project name. In this case, it's My First Project. That is a friendly name for my benefit. It doesn't have to be unique. It's just a way for me to quickly identify what this project is. Project ID is something, again, that I will create, right? When I create a project, I'll provide a project ID. And you can name it whatever you want, but it has to be globally unique among all of Google's projects. So that's why you've got this sort of funny number tacked on the end of it to make it unique. And then you can see there's a project number. That's a unique identifier that Google creates when I create the project. Okay, so those are the sort of the 3 main ways the projects are identified. So let's go through an exercise of creating projects. So you click on this little pull down here, and you get into the project selector pop-up. And you can see that right now I only have one project called my first project. We'll talk about organizations later, so we're not going to worry about that, right? So I push the create or new project button, okay? And you can see here, I can actually type in a name here. So I'm going to call this training main, okay? And you can see it's come up with a project ID that's really unusual. I'm going to actually change this one just because that's just too hard. I'm going to do training main, right? Just with the number, right? And then I'm just going to hit create. And you can see it's creating a project called training main. Okay, I think we're ready. So let's look to see if we can find it. So now, it's like it's still in the middle of creating it. There it goes. Okay, so you can see training main. Now, this thing doesn't always refresh, which is unfortunate. Let me refresh my browser and see if I can get it to. There it is. Okay, so right now I can see that I've got two projects. Now, one thing you might think about is what projects do you see when you log in? And the general answer is any project that I have some relationship with, I will see in the list of projects here. So they don't have to be projects that I created. It's just any project that I have a relationship to. And we'll get more to what it means to have a relationship to later, but that's a later topic. So in this case, since I created these two, then I clearly have a relationship with them. Okay. I can switch to a different project by picking it. You can see I'm on this project. Here it is, training main. Here's the ID and the project number, right? So the next topic is we're going to want to get rid of this first project that was created. I want to name all my projects with that training, starting with training, right? Just so that I keep track of my projects. So how you can do that is you can go to here under project settings, and there's a shutdown option. And again, it's going to say it's going to be deleted after 30 days. So I can copy this, paste here, and then I say shutdown. And once it says it's deleted, it's going to be deleted after 420. And if I go back to my project list, you will see that I only see training main now because I've deleted or scheduled the other project to be deleted. Now, the key here is that project will live for 30 days, and those resources, if I had created them in that project, would be active until the end of the 30 days, in which case everything is deleted. So that way you can recover a project. Let's say you accidentally delete it and you need it tomorrow, you can go back and recover the project and then resume using it. Okay, that's it for this video.